To ARTbreak, everyone. So pleased to see you brave souls that have come out of the cold. Just a word about next week's ARTbreak, which will be somewhat special in that it will feature Anthony J. Hamilton, who recently directed Lorraine Hansberry's Raisin in the Sun at the Civic Theater. And this is going to be in conjunction with the exhibition that just opened, Art, Music, and Feminism in 1950s. And Anthony's talk will analyze key themes in The Raisin, which in 1959 became the first play by a Black female playwright to be produced on Broadway. And as many of you know, it was also turned into a really wonderful movie as well. So it should be an interesting presentation, a little different perspective that ties in with our new show. Well, as I'm sure many of you know, there are numerous artists in residency programs all over, not only the United States, but the world. And these give artists an opportunity to kind of get out of their regular routine and kind of break the creative isolation that they so easily find themselves in. And it offers opportunities to explore or reevaluate their work, usually in an environment that is engaging and stimulating and supportive. Today we're going to hear about a new kind of residency program. It's a multifaceted visual residency that just started up last year after several years of intensive planning and work. And this is the Chrysalis Institute for Emerging Artists. And it focuses on emerging artists who are members of a minority that I guess more specifically could be defined as the term BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color as their focus. And the programs address the specific concerns and unique challenges of this group that are particularly relevant in our current social political environment. So we're very pleased to have with us today Alessandra Pye, who is the founder and director of Chrysalis. She is both an artist and a psychotherapist. And in a way, this is an ideal blending of disciplines that really is the vision behind Chrysalis. And I think maybe best describe the approach as really a combination of therapeutic, and the artistic in a way that becomes more holistic, so that dealing with both the artist and the individual who is the artist. And I think this in itself is really gives a greater depth to their focus. I should say that Alessandra was born in Brazil and came to the US and studied at WMU, so she has a great knowledge of going from one culture to another and the different environments that I think makes her a particularly apt vision for what Chrysalis is about. So please welcome Alessandra Pye.
How's the sound? Could be better. I feel like I need a stool. I'm too short. How's this? Can you hear me okay now? Okay, I'll try to speak up. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So nice to see some friendly faces and some of you I don't know, of course, and I'm looking forward to the dialogue that we can kind of have after today. Yes, thank you so much for the kind introduction. I honestly have no idea if I'm on time with the hour, so I'm just going to try to watch the clock and do what I can to, keep us moving. And I will say that I'm not a fantastic DJ, so I'm going to try to both maneuver the arrows, the papers, the screen, and y'all's responses. So let's see how I do. But yeah, basically, I just so grateful for the opportunity to come here and talk to you about my baby. You know, it feels, I speak often and this feels somewhat vulnerable still. But yeah, so we're here to just kind of learn a little bit more about the what, the why, and the how of the Chrysalis Institute. And what I hope is that this isn't just about the Chrysalis Institute for you, and that you take away some other nuances about what it takes to truly embed a program in equity practices from the beginning and continuously. So let's go. Are you ready? All right. So a little bit of our flow. I like to tell people what they're in for. So we're going to look at the Chrysalis Institute's mission, the foundational concepts, and the overview. Whoop, went too fast. And then call to action. How did this happen in my heart, right? What kind of sparked to make this a thing that exists in the world now? And looking a little bit at what do artist residencies look like today, and what might be, you know, this is again my opinion based upon observation and a lot of work, what could be helpful for the movement of the future for artist residencies. And then we'll go into how, just trying to figure out, you know, I'd like to share with you what it means to have a living radical structure, and then hopefully spark some thought and dialogue for you as well in that regard. A little bit of description of programs and processes, and then I'll introduce you, hopefully we'll have time, to the artists that we worked with last year. All right, so our mission, our foundational concepts and overview. We want to expand the spectrum of opportunities available to BI and POC artists, so to Black, Indigenous, and people of color artists. And we want to do that by supporting self-exploration and contemplative practices and self-care. We're really, truly oriented towards rest and towards restoration in everything that we think about. So it's, you know, that these ideals are pretty fundamental for our work. In terms of foundations, you know, everything in my life gets to be a thing because of values, and trying to figure out, can I start to align my value system to the work that I do, so that I get up each morning feeling like I have the motivation and the spark to continue to do the work, and I don't feel burnt out and exhausted from it. So some of these foundational elements are centering in human growth, social justice imperatives, mainly, you know, restorative justice practices and transformational justice practices, cultural and ancestral inheritance. So who are we calling into place, human and non-human kin that we call in to guide us in this world? And obviously, you know, a deep love for the arts. I'm an artist myself. I didn't get a chance to share very much about me, but you learn, I think, throughout this presentation, that my artist background, my therapist background, and you know, this sort of leaning towards social justice practices are really, you know, important to everything that I do. And in terms of thinking about things from an ecological perspective, you know, words like fertility, sustainability, longevity, all of these things come to mind often in our work as well. So just a quick overview of our programs. We'll get into a little bit more depth, but the Chrysalis Institute offers a 3-tier program. So we have the Milkweed Learning Hub, which is a virtual offering. The artists meet 6 times for 2 hours, and we engage in really wonderful, deep dialogue about lots of things that you find out more about later. And then they have an opportunity to meet with me 101. So if they're looking to deepen the concepts that were discussed in our group discussions, they have an opportunity to meet with me 101. So they schedule that on their own. It's not a therapy session. I'm not the artist therapist, but I definitely bring in those skills of being a therapist in into that work. So, all of the essentials, empathetic listening, just being able to hold space and create a safe container for folks. Those are all very useful from my therapy background. But I make a very clear distinction with the artists that that's not what we're doing, right? So, and then we move into the Chrysalis micro-residency. The physical residency was something that was a part of the very beginning of this planning, if not the most important piece, but didn't really seem to be accessible. And very quickly, we, just developed relationships with folks that were willing to help. So the Fetzer Institute is supporting this year's micro residency, and will bring artists to meet for a long 4-day weekend in the spring, and then another one in the fall. So that feels really special and quick. It's really exciting. The micro residency will offer them time to just rest and be, but they'll have the option to come to yoga class. They'll have the option to come do a little meditation. They'll have the option to come and engage in dialogue with one another, but everything's optional. So that's kind of the plan for the spring. And then the culmination of their time at the Chrysalis Institute is the Way Station podcast. So it's the opportunity for them to kind of be, they're just able to share their narrative with folks, and then they can spread it across this wide web that we've got. The why, so call to action, residency contexts, and what are some desirable characteristics of, future residencies? This is me when I was 7. I love this picture. Every time I do a talk, I share this picture with folks because it's really like, for me, it reminds me of vitality, of joy, of innocence, and of playfulness. And it really helps me connect to this essence in myself, and it keeps the work moving along. The thing, I made this big sort of, image with all of these factors. So aptitudes, skills, life experiences, all of these things, the soup of exposures and the soup of, things that came with me as a human that I had no idea would end up culminating into an artist residency for BIPOC folks, right? So it's really cool to sort of practice that allowance and practice listening and just, slowly giving yourself permission for things to come together in life. So I'm really happy that has happened. That kind of self-awareness in combination, to what we've lived, in the past 3 years in the world. So it's interesting because by no means I'm grateful for what we've been through, the collective trauma we've experienced. And at the same time, I know that was the thing that woke me up into action that was connected to my purpose. Sure, I could have taken action in so many different spaces in the world in the past few years, but if I took any action that sat outside of my passions, my skill set, my experiences, maybe they wouldn't be as effective. So, again, social unrest due to, systemic oppression, police violence. You're looking at, undeniably inequitable practices along health. The bottom picture is a graveyard in Sao Paulo, where I'm from, that had to be dug out for COVID people who died. All of the fires that happened in 2021, just, this extreme sort of, what's the word? The falling apart of our environment happening right in front of our eyes. And then, unchecked acts that are so harmful to our democracy happening, all of this at once, right? In this time frame of 2 years, we went through all of that. So there's something about the alignment that I talked about before and what was happening in the moment that felt like the perfect storm for me to bring the residency to life. like was said earlier, residencies in the United States are widespread. There's so many of them, so many iterations of them. But here are some main points that come to mind as we design our programming. So typical residencies in the United States are situated on land and buildings. They're owned, regulated, managed, and operated by white cis folks. They require long stays. So even though long stays are amazing for artists, it's great to be able to have the time to really dive deep into your creative practice. Those are not always accessible, especially for the artists that we work with. So emerging BIPOC artists that often have 1 or 2 jobs to make ends meet. There are limited scholarships for BIPOC artists. Often when you go on a residency website, you see some kind of link or some kind of side dish type of offering. I like to call them side dishes, and we're the main dish. But so residencies have this side dish offerings where it's just like, oh, and there's this. But, just some observations. And then performative allyship. So anybody can write an equity statement, right? I can write an equity statement, like just plop it on the website and feel like I'm good to go. But what's happening is that if residencies aren't really committed to real structural changes, they're not going to be effective in holding the complex nature of experiences of BIPOC folks. So, yes. In addition, requiring some kind of contribution from the artist, really common practice in artist residencies. You come here and then you leave a piece of art. You come here and you do a community project. These things can be really healthy and wonderful, but when it's transactional, then it's actually harmful to the artist. So we want to be able to maybe think outside the box so that these exchange negotiations serve the artist first and foremost. This is my wish list for newly organized artist residencies. It's really basic. This could go on and on and on. But the idea here is that if we could have more BIPOC queer originated spaces, that would be amazing, right? That's already happening all over the place, and it should continue. An accessibility mindset. So perhaps more length of stay options. Maybe instead of 2 weeks to 6 months, we're looking at a model that accommodates people's work life and parenting duties and things like that. And then, yes, support for parent artists, and then attending to the needs of artists with disabilities. These are items of a wish list that the Chrysalis Institute is not itself prepared to offer either. But what's important is that we have the seed planted so that as resources come in, we can keep watering that seed, and then eventually it will sprout into something that, is active and available. So, what else? Oh, yes. So what I was talking about earlier in regards to that exchange, how about collaborative initiatives to prevent placing the burden on the artist? So then you're talking about relational instead of transactional exchanges. One example of that is if I want to attend an artist residency and maybe I'm a writer and I have this book that I just need some time to get out of the way. And then the residency that I'm planning on attending is saying, well, you need to do a community talk, or you need to share a piece of writing with us. That could derail the artist's process because now they have to, shift their creative energy into some other place. So that's why we want to have conversations about these kinds of things so that we reach we get as close as possible to equity. Openness to feedback, so consistently revisiting and fine-tuning offerings. Just recently, we're in the middle of a submissions process right now. Today is the last day to submit applications for our spring program. And very recently, I've had somebody saying, hey, can you clarify your COVID practices? Yes, shoot, we're a team of 2 people. It's me and my husband. That's it. We're volunteers in this thing. But yes, absolutely. We got to fine tune COVID protocols. Oh, my accent just came out. Did you hear that? COVID. Anyway, so yes, and then somebody else said, hey, would I be able to bring my baby? At this time, we can't accommodate that, but the seed is definitely planted. So anytime somebody asks about an adjustment, an accommodation, some sort of a way that could enhance their potential to participate, we're taking note and we're trying to add that to our processes, our meetings, and all of that. So important stuff. What else? There's more, but I think I've said enough. Okay, the how. Okay. I don't know if any of you attended the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation talk that happened. Anyway, Kaya's over here. She was in the panel with me, so she's going to hear. I'm going to say it again. But, that was such a cool panel. And one of the asks was that we reflected on being radical. And I very much think that the Chrysalis Institute is a radical attempt, even though it's soft and, contemplative practices and rest, but it's very much a radical thing, right? So it kind of brought me to thinking about what that might mean in actually writing it out. So I'll share a little bit about that with you. So if you have a living radical structure, it's living because it's not finite, it's not completely determined, and it has this end point that's already been accomplished. It's living, it's open, it's receptive, right? And some of the things that kind of support my radical practice. So to listen, what's the guidance? And I did that, right? 2020, in the middle of all of that chaos, I sat and listened. Who am I listening to? To my ancestors, to animal kin, to teachers that have passed on, to books and passages of things that are inspiring to me, right? So really connecting to all that has been built up to this point, all of the guiding anchors that have served me, and then observing what are things looking like. Can I try to develop the capacity to observe what's happening around me from a non-judgmental stance so I can extract the facts and then maybe reflect? And then we go into reflection meaning there's something that is happening now, what I shared with you about the current state of residencies. That's what's happening now. And then there is this imaginative, visionary sort of process for the future. How do we build that bridge? That's the reflective process, right? Imagining the bridge between that's the difference between what is and what could be. Yeah. And then exploring what are possible alternatives? What can we play around with? How can we think outside of the box, right? And explore alternatives. And then we act. Acting is really scary, right? Because we think, oh, what if we make mistakes? What if this thing tanks? What if it doesn't work out, right? What if people laugh at me? So there are all kinds of things that we think about. But it won't be perfect. And it is through those mistakes that we're going to fine-tune processes. If we're engaging with that piece of listening and observing and reflecting, I can't guarantee it, but I think we can absolutely enhance our chances of creating something that is useful and beneficial to society. That's my spiel on living radical structures. Okay, our programs, the Milkweed Learning Hub. So again, it's a virtual space where artists explore the intersection of identity and creative practice. I probably shouldn't look that way and then talk because it's like very abrupt. Okay, I'll just stay here. It's a multifaceted platform. We meet via Zoom. We talk about identity. We talk about family of origin. We talk about ancestry. We talk about our emotions. We talk about our values and how all of that soup ends up translating in our creative practice. How does all of that influence our creative practice? And the fact that the artists are having these, the dialogue with each other, there's a super rich exchange amongst them. And it's kind of, I feel super privileged to be able to witness that rich dialogue between them. The Chrysalis Micro Residency, again, this is at this time is the only tier of our program that is fully sponsored this year by the Fetzer Institute. We'll be staying at the Gilchrist Retreat Center for 4 days. And the artists will have all of their meals taken care of. They'll have their transportation paid for. It's all included. They have to pay $0 to attend. So it's really a special offering, and I can't wait to be in person with them. The Way Station podcast, again, we felt like it was really important to create some sort of avenue for the narrative, right? For the story, because all of these months we're spending posting on Instagram about the artists and sharing their work and trying to be as active as possible with them. And at the same time, the podcast feels like such a good sort of closing chapter for them to share their experience, not just with us, but also how they came to be artists in the first place. Okay, eligibility. So this is what we ask them to look and confirm. They have to, we ask that they at least add their initials to these statements. So aiming to be a professional artist, it's not a hobby or a pastime. They have some kind of professional artistic achievement locally or regionally or nationally. It doesn't matter which. Being committed to your practice and having worked seriously over the last 3 to 5 years. So it can't be just something that, you decided to do last week. There has to be a thread here. And yes, operating on a semi-professional basis, but still needing that additional support. So it feels kind of nebulous and not super clear to determine what an emerging artist is. So what we had to do is to decide what we want to offer and then align with the best version of the definition of what an emerging artist is, that sort of combines well with the Chrysalis Institute's offerings. So yes. Oh my, I'm really behind on my flipping of my papers. Okay. We are in submission and admission. So we're right now in a submission process. Again, like I said earlier, this ends at midnight tonight. Really excited to look at all of the submissions, but I don't get to do that right away. So who gets to do that? Our selection committee. So these are folks that work in the arts and have worked in the arts and have reached some kind of some important accomplishments in their lives as artists. So they come in, we share with them the folders depending on discipline. So the visual artists go to one committee member, the multidisciplinary artists go to one committee member, and then the writers go to another committee member. These volunteers, I would love it if they weren't volunteers anymore, but they are volunteers at this time, unfortunately. They look over these folders and then they do a little scoring for us and then send us their choices. So that's kind of how selection works. This is a non-blind process. Why is that? When you do blind applications, you don't need to see people's biographical information. You don't need to do that. But in this case, we're centered around Black, Indigenous, and people of color, right? So we need to understand what kind of connection you have to your background and identity practices. So we need to know. So that's why it's a non-blind process. By transparent, I just mean we tell you how it's going to go, and any questions that you have, you can ask us and we'll tell you. There's nothing that happens sort of, there's nothing that isn't for you to know. The only thing that we ask is that artists don't contact the selection committee members directly, because that can be a little disruptive to the process. A $15 fee is required for application. Most artist residencies charge between $20 and $30. We charge a $15 fee, and that money always goes straight, well, always, we've done this 2 times, so now I'm saying always. It has in the past gone to the books, because they have book discussions, so we buy them their books and then ship it over to their homes. Okay, yes, accepted artists are notified, and then after they sign an agreement, they're granted access to a custom online platform, and that's kind of where we communicate. It's like our secret little Facebook that we have, and we chat with each other there. Ooh. It's 12:30. I'm doing really well on time. Okay. All right. So our Monarchs. These are our alumni artists, our graduates, the people that have gone through the program. And I just want to share a little bit with you about who they are and encourage you to check them out, check their artwork. They are incredible and brilliant, and I have so much love for them. And in addition, just wanted to chat with you a little bit about what's cooking in terms of that long vision. What does it mean to have this relational focus with the folks that came through the program, so that it's not this thing of, them coming through and then we never talk to them again, right? So continuity is really, really important. Okay, so here's the spring crew. Melissa Sutherland Moss, a visual artist, incredible collages from Brooklyn, New York. To the bottom, you see Lisa Brown. Lisa Brown is a photographer who lives in Washington, D.C. area. And Ashia Ajani from Denver, Colorado, a poet, writer, activist, eco-conscious, amazing human. And then Evan Sams, who is a musician from Chicago. And this was our very first cohort. Really brave people, right? Because we had never done this before, and then they signed up and said yes, and yeah, so cool. But I would love it if you took a little bit of time. Maybe you could go on our website or on our Instagram page and check out their work. Really incredible stuff. The fall cohort, Laura Carolini Casas from North Carolina. So Laura is a potter, but also an illustrator. Fantastic artist. Kenia Hale, an Ivy League college student that does some real hard punk music, garage, like raw sounding, really cool, amazing person. Ophelia Ark from Brooklyn, New York. She does these incredible sculptures with crochet. She's in school right now, trying to get into a master's program. Eric Francis, who is an artist also from Denver, Colorado. He's a writer, but he's definitely, if he's watching, he'd be like, yeah, upset, but multidisciplinary, lots of things. I could not say that Eric is only a writer. Eric is very much a multidisciplinary artist. So that's the crew. And then just wanted to share a little bit about what happens when you're done, right? Or what would we like to happen when folks are done? We would love to cultivate the sort of continuous involvement, so remained involvement in the program as paid ambassadors. Would love to make that happen. So as resources come along, this is one of the pockets where these resources will fall into. Facilitating artist virtual gatherings as paid guests. So it's really important that I imagine my role as temporary so that I can continue to further the vision of the Chrysalis Institute without having to do all things. I currently do all of the things, right? So it's really important to maintain that mindset. And some of the artists that we already worked with show extreme promise in being able to actually facilitate the spaces that I currently facilitate for them. So that would be really beautiful to see that happening. And then what we have happening already, which is so incredible, we also received some support from the Omega Institute, been making some friends there, and they are supporting the Artist Alumni Retreat. So this year in October, I'm taking all of last year artists to Rhinebeck, New York, and we'll be there together for 6 days. And because they last year artists did not get to take advantage of a physical residency, this will be the first time that they will meet. So that's really exciting. So what we hope to do is to always have an alumni retreat that happens the year after their time at the Chrysalis Institute. So they are very excited about heading out to upstate New York and hang out together this year. What else? Yes. Oh, this is also a no cost to them. We're still working on collecting funds for their travel, but everything else is taken care of. And then hopefully they would join the selection committee and then join our advisory board that is currently forming. Yes. I wanted to lift up too, since we have a little bit of time, if that's okay, the work of these three incredible women that I've been sharing space with for the past year. Felicia Holman, a multidisciplinary artist from Chicago. Mick Bokeman, who actually owns the Orange Door Residency that has many of the similar features of the Chrysalis Institute. And then Marnie Temple, who is a Canadian artist and residency owner, who has a residency in British Columbia. And we often meet to talk about these very things. We meet to talk about transformational ways to offer artists best case scenario, the best possible experiences that they can have. And without them, I don't think that I would be able to be here chatting with you about this program. Their input is so valuable. And we created this little group called EARL, the Emerging Residency Leaders Group. And yeah, it's a thing. And we love each other. And I just wanted to lift up their contributions to what Chrysalis is today. Yes, I wanted to also say that my husband wakes up at 6 a.m. to edit podcasts and then comes home and sometimes edits podcasts until 10 p.m. and then he goes to his regular job. So huge, let's shout out to Eric Pye, like somehow. So yes, I'm really lucky to have the kind of support that I have. Thank you so much. I'd love to hear your questions and kind of be in dialogue with you all. Thank you. We finished early. Yes.
What if their residency is week long, what are they doing that week?
Mm-hmm. So the question is this happening in Kalamazoo, right? Because I mentioned Fetzer a couple of times. And what are they doing for the week? Is that what you're asking? Okay. So because we started as a virtual program, our base is my home, right? Crane Avenue. That's our base. So yes, Kalamazoo. But also, it's important to note that while we are navigating what the physical offerings will be, there is no home. This year, we have the Gilchrist Retreat Center, funded by the Fetzer Institute, as our home. They're huge collaborators because I have deep relationships with those folks, and I'm involved in some other retreat center equity practices. So, that makes sense for the time being. So we're going to do our best to maintain this relationship forever and ever. And I want to stay open as well for any other opportunities that might come our way. So right now, this is where we are. And did I do a land acknowledgement? I didn't do that. I went right in, didn't I? I'm so sorry. It's essential that we recognize where we are. We are an Anishinaabe land, the land of the Council of Three Fires, Potawatomi, Ottawa, and Chippewa. Yes? Is this right? And it's really important to note that anything that is fruitful that happens in our workspaces, in our personal lives, is only happening because of violence and theft, right? So, sorry, I know it's a downer, but it's true, and we need to think about these things. Anyway, to answer your question in regards to what do they do for the week. So with the Fetzer offering, they're actually together for 4 days. So it's a long weekend, and they are resting. that's what they're doing. If they want to, they can do some yoga with me. If they want to, they can come to do a little bit of meditation practice. If they want to, they can come and engage in dialogue and share meals. But it's all choice-based. So yes, hopefully that's what will happen. They'll just rest. If they want to do work, they can do work too. But yeah, that's the goal. Yes, Kyle?
Not a question, but just to expound on why that's important for them to rest and that whole concept of self-care that we are using that time.
Yes, so you're saying chat a little bit more with us about, yes, the importance of rest and self-care. Yes, for sure. So rest and self-care is so popular now, right? It's everywhere, at least in my awareness, right? There's so many resources and so much encouragement for that to happen. But, you know, if you think about who we're serving Black, Indigenous, and people of color artists, right? Who come from, you know, centuries of exploitation and have become, unfortunately, forced to follow a rhythm of productivity that does not align with creativity, right? How are we going to be creative if we're exhausted, right? How are we going to produce these, you know, and offer the gifts of our artistic practice if we, you know, need to take a nap, or if we have 2 jobs that we have to juggle, right? Many of the artists that we worked with made a serious commitment and a sacrifice to juggle all of the things that they had in order to be present. Rest is a new concept, even though it feels really basic, right? But definitely needing to be reinforced. So the books that the artists will get this year will be Rest is Resistance. So good one. Check it out if you haven't. Trisha, somebody help me. Does anybody have? Hersey. Yes. Thank you, Shannon. Trisha Hersey. They'll also have a book by Octavia Harum. I don't know the title, but she's a yogi who also talks about rest and restoration really often. And then they'll have Creative Quest by Questlove, because that's just a great book that everyone should have. Yes. Did I answer? Yes. What kind of art do I do? Oh, I love that question. I'm a painter, but I allow myself other explorations. So I've been, just playing around with a little bit of sculpture lately, but really little because I'm busy with this. But hopefully I can pick that up again. But I'm a painter, acrylics mostly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
You mentioned that you consider the artist's previous achievements. What do you consider as achievements?
Yeah. So typically a submission will say, oh, I had this show, or I did this gig in at this pub, or I was featured in this magazine article for doing this community project, things like that. So any way that you can demonstrate that you put yourself out there, you know, and showed your art to the world, those are the things that the selection committee will be looking for. Yeah.
You also mentioned earlier that one of the things that you're trying to undo is like that give back practice of the end of the residencies. You mentioned that it could be harmful for the artists. How would you say that it becomes harmful for the artists?
Are you saying explain a little bit more?
Yeah.
How? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So one example that I like to use is the idea of, oftentimes when you apply for a residency, they'll say, okay, you get this, and then you get this, and then at the end, leave us this, right? There's some kind of a transactional thing. I don't think it's a bad move. I just think that we need to be more conscientious so that it works for the artist, because the artist might have a totally different idea on what they want to do during their residency. And if I'm asking them to leave a piece, to create a piece just for us, I might be taking away from that rich opportunity for them to do what they want to do, not what I want to do, right? So that dialogue, I think, is important. Let's have a conversation on what's feasible for you and would work for us as well, right? That's kind of, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like more asking them what they're willing to do than what they're expected to do.
I think that's, just so important, right? Because absolutely, absolutely. And it's not to say that we shouldn't ask. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that reciprocity of it, right? Is this a circular type of give and take, or is it just me extracting from you? That wouldn't make any sense, right? To be extractive in that kind of process. So, yeah. Yes.
So I like that you had a nice mix of type of artists.
Mhm.
And is that something that's consciously thought about when you're choosing your artists for the next group?
Yes, absolutely. So my oldest is a musician. So as you know, because I'm a visual artist, my oldest is a musician. My youngest is a visual artist. Of course, my direction is always with the visual arts, right? But then it felt so awesome to be able to expand because when the artists get together in their virtual spaces, they actually have an opportunity to share their work with one another and do mini critiques. So it's so rich to have this variety within the space. And because we're very conscientious about our foundational elements that I talked about earlier, so the environment, social justice imperatives, human growth, people who are applying are kind of in that mindset already. They're at least open to these concepts. So it's really cool to see how this multidisciplinary, this multimodal type of gathering happens, and it's just really, really cool. Yeah, yeah. So yes, intentional. Not right away though. At first I was like visual, and then it shifted. So yeah. Anyone else? Am I losing you? No, okay. Oh, I need to be here. Yes.
Have you looked at how the model that you use for making this happen, or arriving at the goal that you have, is common to other domains besides art? So Council's question is, I just received an email from a Kalamazoo native, Marisa Navarra, who is the Commissioner for Housing in Chicago. And she had just given a talk about her first year in that position and the goals for the next year. And the outline for arriving at equity in housing is the same model that you use.
Absolutely, absolutely. Across the board, right? It's just that, because I do a little bit of facilitation in that regard and a little bit of work in that regard, it comes, it's not a big rub for me to sort of implement what I know of equitable practices into the Chrysalis Institute, but it is unique because of the population we're working with. And I would say that equitable practices are much, much easier done, in my opinion, when you're starting something from scratch. When you're trying to dismantle 100-year-old institutions, right, then you've got your work cut out for you. So that's a big job. So when I talk about my wish for newly established residencies, I know that we have the freedom to make some calls that are potentially more difficult for already established residencies to do sort of overnight. I can start from this point and they have to do, just a lot of dismantling, just hard. Yeah.
Hey, sorry, another one.
Sure.
I was wondering, is there any structures in place here in Kalamazoo which you've become aware of that have hindered or helped your mission?
Are there any structures here in Kalamazoo that have helped or hindered my mission? So for sure, the support of the Fetzer Institute has been amazing. The Arts Council has supported us last year with some programming funds. The United Way has supported us with some funds last year. So I I wouldn't say that there's a group or I wouldn't say that anything is hindering the progress of our work. Nope. Mm-mm.
What is your website?
thechrysalisinstitute.com. Let's see. There you go. Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'm on my tippy toes. I like this. Yes, Kim.
I don't have a question, it's just that I really appreciate the focus on rest, because like you said, even though there's this wave of it's cool to do self-care and rest, that's not what everybody has access to. It's not cool in there and everyone's around. And it's, for some it's really hard to be able to relax even. And be able to get that rest, to find a way to make something or connect to yourself.
Yes.
So I just want to say that it's a wonderful gift
Mm-hmm.
for folks to be able to have permission to rest and space and what they need to do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes. Did you all hear what Kim said? Yes. Yes. So the importance of rest and the fact that it's not easy, right? That rest itself is not necessarily accessible for all people. And I mean, there's so many nuances to that, right? What are the assumptions around rest for our capitalist society, right? If rest is counter to productivity, should we be encouraging it? Yeah, we all, well, even though I wasn't born here, I still have had that upbringing of pull yourself up by your bootstraps type of sort of mentality. I'm trying myself to sort of dismantle that, because it's exhausting, right? Can't do that. I need to take a lot of time to restore, so that we can show up with the best version of ourselves to the good work that we're trying to do in the world. So yeah. Anyone else? Thank you so much for coming. So awesome. Thank you.